and I'm based in São Paulo. I see some names on the list, some familiar names. Hello, everybody. How are you? Are you okay? You can send messages in the. Hi, Mariana. How are you? Lucas, Anita. Hello, everyone. Hope you are okay. Gabriela, Vivian, Kelly. Oh wow, so many people. That is really nice. It's really nice of you to attend this webinar today. Hello, Carmen. Nice to meet you. I mean, nice to know that you're here. Thank you for watching. Juliano. Wow, somebody from Portugal. That is so nice. Okay. That was gonna be my next question. Could you tell me where you're from? There's São Paulo. Somebody in Oxford. Wow, what an honor. That's nice. Porto Alegre, Paraná, Espírito Santo, Contagem, Novo Hamburgo, Goiânia, Pelotas, Pouso Alegre. Oh, wow. All right. That is so nice. Okay, the next question in the traditional social conversation, how is the weather where you are? I can tell you that here in São Paulo, it's cold. It's very cold, and it's about to rain in a little bit. Okay, it's dry and cold, very cold, cloudy, really cloud. Raining, Rio de Janeiro. Sunny and warm in Oxford. Oh, I envy you. That is so nice. Okay. Cloudy and cold. Bit cold. Cleese, hi Cleese, how are you? Right, so here in Portugal, it's cloudy and it will rain again. Okay, raining in Brasilia. That's really nice. Okay, fine, dear. All right. Okay, sunny and warm. All right. Okay, so we are 3 minutes out already, so I think it's okay for us to start. So let me just begin just saying that I hope you are all well and you're safe and you're healthy, that you're staying home as much as you can, because sometimes you do have to go out and it's totally understandable, but hope you're staying home as much as you can with your family, with your loved ones. I hope everybody's okay. I hope everybody's healthy. This is a very difficult moment for us to interact with each other, but thankfully, and I want to thank Disal for offering this webinar today here too. I'd like to thank you for watching this webinar and for staying strong through this moment that we are living right now. This is, I don't know about you, but for me, it's very strange. I've never thought I would live through something that would actually make the whole world stop. This is very, this is a bizarre moment. Yeah, it's very strange. But I know that you are working from home. I know that you're teaching, that you are, planning, delivering your lessons, that you are talking to parents, that you are talking to work coordinators, that you are doing everything you can to keep up the good work while, keeping the house in order, homeschooling the kids. It is a lot to do. Really, it is a lot to do. But let me just tell you this, that you're doing great. Okay, we're going to get through this. And I want you to know that. Okay, so thank you for that. So this talk today was supposed to be a workshop, with all of us in the same room, working together, exchanging ideas. But unfortunately, with this new situation, we had to change plans and change the format a little bit. But the intent is still there. So let's see what we can accomplish today. Now, I'm going to share my screen, so I will not be able to see your comments, but I have planned for a moment for questions and comments at the end. But even if that doesn't happen, I will leave you with my email, and you can send me your questions later on, okay? So let's start. Here. Now, this talk is called Keep Calm and Teach Science because over the last few years, you might have observed, schools have changed their programs to become bilingual. So schools that used to have 1, 2, maybe 3 lessons a week in the regular English program, that's what used to happen. But now they are offering more hours of English classes, and sometimes they are offering 1 or 2 subjects in English. So it's usually math or science. So teachers, us teachers actually, we had to accommodate this new content and adapt to this new reality quite quickly, right? So past the initial shock, there is this moment of, okay, so I gotta see what this is all about. So I'm gonna take a breath, I'm gonna calm down, and I'm gonna take a look at the contents that I have to teach. But the idea for this presentation is to actually begin a conversation about teaching science. Unfortunately, we cannot do this in an hour, right? But I want to start a conversation with you and present and discuss some ideas on how to do it, right? But let me remind you that, again, this is from the point of view of the language teacher, right? The English teacher, you. So with that in mind, I organized the presentation this way. So we are going to have a quick review on CLIL. We have already seen a lot being said about it, but I want to talk about our specific context. So why is CLIL important for our situation, and how does it work? I want to talk a little bit about that. Next, we are going to take a look at a science lesson from one of our science titles for young learners. And that lesson will also serve as the basis for our discussion. Then we're going to take a look at some aspects that are helpful to consider when you plan and deliver a science lesson. And those aspects can be applied not only for younger learners, but also for other age groups as well. Then we're going to take a look at one idea for a best practice in teaching primary science. Next, we are going to see the sequel to that lesson, and so you can apply the concepts that we will discuss here. And then we're going to close with some final ideas that can also be applied for remote learning. Does that sound good? So let's begin from the beginning, which is the question. So what is CLIL? Now, we know that the acronym CLIL stands for Content and Language Integrated Learning. But let's take a look at this definition from the TKT CLIL course. CLIL is an approach or method which integrates the teaching of content from the curriculum with the teaching of a non-native language. Okay, so it's pretty much what the acronym describes, right? So it's the integration of content and a foreign language, and in our case, science and English, in a learning context. Okay, so that's clear. But what happens in the classroom? CLIL can take place in different ways or models, if you want to call it that way. So let's take a look. Now, an example of what we call soft CLIL would be a course that is more language-led than content-led, with around 45 minutes a week. So in practical terms, an example of that would be something like a content lesson in a language course, right? Something we are kind of used to. The opposite of that is what we call hard CLIL. So in this example, we are talking about a subject-led course that takes up about 50% of the curriculum, going from half of it taught both in Portuguese and in English, or all of it taught in English, right? Now, observe that these two examples are the extreme ends of the CLIL spectrum. So CLIL may take place in many different forms in between those two, with different teaching hours, different amounts of content and language. So the first thing you should identify is the CLIL model your school has chosen to adopt, right? Another important issue we need to mention when talking about CLIL is what we call the 4 C's, or the 4 components of a CLIL lesson. And they are content, which is related to the progression in knowledge, skills, and understanding related to specific elements of a curriculum. So we're talking about the subject that we're teaching. Next up is culture, which is understanding of ourselves and understanding of other cultures, the understanding that there are people of different cultural backgrounds, and the development of a feeling that you are part of a community and you are also a global citizen. The next one is cognition, which is related to developing thinking skills, which link the formation of concepts, understanding, and language. Remember the lots and hots? The lower order thinking skills, the higher order thinking skills, and how to use them. That's all in the realm of cognition. And the last C is for communication, which is about using language to learn and learning to use language. But it's important to mention that here, language is not about following the grammatical progression found in a traditional language course that we're used to, but more about language of learning, which is the language students need related to the subject being learned. So an example of that would be content words. We have language for learning, which is the language you need in the learning environment. So functional language like asking, agreeing, and comparing are examples of that. And the last one is language through learning, which is incidental, which is it's something that is not planned, but students can register that and you can use it and recycle it later, right? So little by little, those words will become part of the student's repertoire, right? So that was our little review on CLIL essentials, let's say. Now let's take a look at a science lesson and see how we can apply these concepts into our lesson plan and delivery. But first, let me give you the context of the lesson. So I took this one from one of our titles in our education catalog called Cambridge Primary Science, all right? So this is from level 1. Now, the target audience for this lesson is, let's say, I put here 7 and 8 years old because I chose this age group because it's important that students know how to read and write so they can make notes and in some way keep a record of what they are learning. But you might have older or younger students, so make sure that you use the appropriate strategies for them, okay? We're going to talk about that. That's the idea for this presentation today, right? The CEFR level required for this lesson is A1. And these are the learning objectives. So recognize and name common materials, use senses to explore and talk about different materials, try to answer questions by collecting evidence through observation, explore and observe in order to collect evidence, measurements and observations to answer questions, and record stages in work, right? Now, this is the lesson. Okay, so it's basically divided into presentation of the vocabulary of materials. Then students are going to identify the materials in this picture. Next, they are going to walk around the classroom and, if possible, the school to find other objects made with those materials. They are going to talk about what they feel like and find small parts of the materials using a magnifying glass. So have one ready. Then they're going to read this passage about how to use different materials to make a car. And in the end, they're going to think about what they have learned. Okay, so let's put our CLIL hats on and plan this lesson, right? Now, there are some aspects I like to present to you to consider when you plan a science lesson using the CLIL approach, right? There are 4 of them. So there's scaffolding, classroom language, developing learning strategies, consolidation, and differentiation. So let's start with scaffolding. I like this picture. It's simple, but it translates what I want to say. It pretty much shows what scaffolding is, which is taking steps to provide support for students to understand new concepts and to develop new skills. Now, this kind of support is temporary. It is important to remember that. But scaffolding helps students to develop the strategies they need, so they don't need your support tomorrow. And they can also use those strategies to learn English better in the future and in other subjects as well. Also, scaffolding means to provide support for all aspects of learning. So we're not talking about just the language. We're talking about learning strategies. We are talking about developing confidence. So it is important to provide that kind of support in every step, in every aspect of the process. But how can we provide scaffolding? Let's see some ideas, right? So we can create interest. We can have conversations about the topic. We can bring resources that will raise students' interest about the content. Well, in this case, we can bring a dark bag with objects in it, and students can put their hands in the bag and try to identify an object and maybe name the object and the material if they know the name already. This is a great way to access what they already know and pre-teach vocabulary if you have the opportunity. We should provide support before, during, and after the task, because not only that will give them a better idea of what to do, but it will also help them understand the purpose of every step of the activity. We should use the board, we should use visuals and realia, like visuals, lots of visuals, flashcards, realia. They always help, especially with new vocabulary. Visual aids can be used to present content. You can use them in activities to practice vocabulary, for review, anything else you can think of. They're a really great tool, and we use them a lot, over and over again. So here's a suggestion for the flashcards for this lesson. Right, so we have pictures of the materials described in the lesson, and we have, so students can identify them and actually see the materials being used in objects they know, right? Next one, we can break down the tasks into small steps. That will help them, that will give them time to understand each step of the process. It will give you time to see if they are actually doing it. So, and you also have time to answer questions. You can actually check if the instructions are clear to see if they need support. We can demonstrate tasks as well, or what we can also call modeling. We can model the tasks, right? So just like using flashcards, they will help students see what they're supposed to do. So it's the visual element again. And it's a great opportunity to answer questions and again, clarify any points that are still not clear. Right? We can use word banks, glossaries, sentence substitution tables, writing frames. We can and should provide ways for them to keep a record of what they are learning and to guide their production. So in this case, we have a glossary that comes with the material itself. But if you have students that need more guidance, you may also want to use these cards with the words that describe the material. So students can match these words with the flashcards and make their own notes and create their own picture dictionary. That's another way to deal with it. We can use model texts, again, to guide the language production, but we'll talk about that in a minute, right? And last but not least, we should always provide constructive feedback. Now, we won't be able to go into detail about feedback today, and I apologize for that in advance. But as I mentioned before, because this is the beginning of a conversation, for CLIL, feedback is very important. Actually, feedback is important for everything, but keep that in mind when you prepare your CLIL lesson, all right? So next item is classroom language. So why do we use language in the classroom? Let's take a look at some ideas. So we can use language to activate prior knowledge, present new ideas, encourage students to collaborate, develop students' understanding of the language and the content, find out difficulties with the content, to help students develop thinking skills and make links, to encourage creative talk, to monitor learning. So we must observe and listen to students as they work in the classroom, and to respond to the students' needs and provide assistance. But how can we develop classroom language? How can we stimulate students to talk? Take a look at this idea. You can use closed questions to help students remember or revisit key content vocabulary. Let's take a look at a few suggestions. One is, what is a chain? What is a food chain? That deserves a long answer. Are all the buildings the same? What is an example of a 2D shape? You can also use open questions to develop problem solving and higher order thinking skills. Remember, developing thinking skills is also part of the CLIL approach. These are some examples. What would happen to a food chain if plants died? How could the result of the match have been different? Okay? Okay. And you can also use questions to help students think and stimulate discussion and collaboration. Take a look at these examples. What did you think of that answer? What can you add to the answer? How do you know that's the answer? Right, so these are really good questions for critical thinking. But sometimes, even with those questions, students will not feel able to respond, right? So in that case, you may use handouts to guide the activity and the language that they are supposed to produce. Like this one. This is an example from the same lesson, which is very guided and very, very specific. So students are supposed to draw and write simple words, right? But as they progress in the course, you may want to use something like this, right? So what are they supposed to do? They have to continue their research at home and complete the text in the handout. But if you observe, the language in the handout is already guiding the student to produce the language expected. Again, we are working on language production and thinking skills, right? The next aspect I'd like to talk about is to develop learning strategies. Now, take a moment and think about you as a student. Think about what you do when you are studying, when you are learning something new. What are the things that you do that you know will help you and will help you learn, will help you remember things? So I'll give you an example. For me, I'm the kind of person who needs to go to school. I need classes, I need lectures. So I need to pay attention to what the teacher is saying. I need to see the teacher, to see and hear the teacher making connections between what's in the text or what's on the board to what they're saying. I need to do that. I need to take notes. I need to organize my notes. I need to do homework. Homework helps me remember what I learned in class. Pretty nerdy, but that's how it worked for me. So if we think about it, we all have our own strategies to help us remember content, to help us make connections, to help us learn. And there are strategies that you can use in different moments of the lesson. So here are some examples. Take a look at this. Here are some examples of strategies that you can use before a task. There are also examples of things that you can do during the task. And there are things that you can do after the task, right? Now, our students also have their own strategies, but sometimes they don't know about those strategies, or sometimes they don't know, they don't even know that they have them. So our job to begin with is to first show them the strategies, show them how they work, the modeling again, providing the visual so they can really reflect on it. So they know what they are. And then from there, encourage them to use their own strategies. Maybe try different ones to see what works for them. Maybe they will come up with a different combination of strategies that they can use. So whenever we can, we should take a moment to focus on learning strategies and really have them use them, experiment with them, and think about the ones that they should use. Now, another strategy which is a more complex one, is the one that we call metacognition. Now, metacognition is the act of thinking about thinking, because the picture pretty much explains it. But why is it important? Because it encourages students to understand what works best for them, and it also helps them develop self-awareness skills that will become important as they get older. So it's a good idea to stimulate it whenever we can. And in our context, we can stretch it from thinking about thinking to thinking about learning, right? And the suggestions for metacognition for thinking about learning, here are some. So students can prepare and plan for learning. Now, this is about activating prior knowledge. So you can help them out by pre-teaching key vocabulary or by eliciting names of objects so they can match them with the correct materials. Remember the lesson we are teaching? So this is an example. They can select the strategies they will use, so they can choose to draw pictures of the materials they've learned about, or maybe find objects and label them. They can write the words down. They can write sentences about them. They can, really think about what helps them remember those words. They can monitor their own learning, and you are an important part of it. So they should feel comfortable to ask you for assistance. Right? And the other thing that really helps is that they can ask each other for suggestions, for assistance, for guidance, right? So they can talk about not only what they did, but what they liked about it and the things that they can do to improve it, really critically thinking about their performance. Next up is they can integrate strategies. Now, they can look at what they have done and think about words or phrases they need to talk about it, words that they don't know, and maybe work with a partner to look them up, and then keep a record of them to use them in the future, with the language through learning. So they can keep a record of that. You can work on them in class as well, and they can start using them more frequently until they feel comfortable using the words. They can evaluate their own learning. Now, self-assessment is very important to help not only raise awareness of what is going on, but to raise confidence and critical thinking. So students may talk about what they liked about the lesson and how confident they felt while doing it, what went well, what needs improvement, what they can do differently next time. So it's the beginning of a dialogue between you and them about their performance. Now, you see, there are many options to go to, right? But again, before that happens, it is important that we show them how the strategies work. So you will be the reference, you will be the model, right? Show them how the strategies work. And then let them experiment with them, with the strategies, and encourage your students to use what works best for them. Each student will have a single combination. What works for me doesn't work for you, and it doesn't work for him or for her, but it works for me. And and your combination is your own, his combination is her own, his combination is his own, her combination is her own. So it is a way to personalize learning. And when you personalize it, it is easier for you it is easier for the content to actually be absorbed. It is easier for students to actually learn, right? Then finally, the last aspect to consider when planning a CLIL lesson is consolidating learning and differentiation. Now, consolidating learning is especially important in a CLIL lesson or using the CLIL approach, because there are two things happening here. Students are acquiring new content and in a foreign language. So there are two new things happening here. There are two new things that I need to learn. I need to learn content, and I need to learn language. So if you help students consolidate their learning, they will be able to access what they already know and then improve their skills. But to do that, they have to revisit the content again and again. in different ways. Okay, so here are some suggestions to help students consolidate their learning. So the first one is monitoring. That is, we should observe if students are having trouble with the task, and if the difficulty exists because maybe they don't understand the concepts, like the scientific concept. So the issue is with the content, not the language, right? Maybe it is the language. So what can we do to help them out? What are the strategies? What are the tools, the resources that we are going to use to help them out? Maybe the instructions are not clear. Maybe you can demonstrate the task again, and whatever the case, you should check that the instructions are clear, right? Or maybe they just don't feel confident enough to do it, but why don't they feel confident enough to do it? So again, it's providing support, right? It's providing the kind of support that they need to move on. So, but either way, you may help them, for example, remember the previous discussion that you had on the concepts. So what did we talk about? How did that work? Take a look at your notes. Take a look, remember what you talked, remember what you discussed in class about this concept or that concept or this or that, right? Maybe as a group, in a group, you can elicit instructions. You can ask students what to do. So what is it that you have to do? You have to do this, then you have to do that. Next, you're going to do that, something else. So elicit from them what they're supposed to do, right? Or you can model the task, right? You can demonstrate the task. Maybe if necessary, you have to explain again or to demonstrate again, not only the instructions, but maybe parts of a lesson, whole parts of a lesson, like explaining the concept again, or maybe demonstrating the task again. So monitoring is important because you need to pay attention to what is going on, what is not working according to plan, and what you can do to help them out. Next up is reviewing. And reviewing helps students consolidate and deepen their knowledge. So in the beginning of each lesson, it's a good idea to refer back to what they learned before, right? So take a moment and explore what they learned before, to check if they remember, to check what they remember, to check who remembers what, which is also important. So maybe you can do that doing a warm-up activity to review vocabulary, to review structures, or maybe, right? And then at the end of the lesson, it is important to also to help to give them a moment to summarize what they learned, right? Summarizing helps them remember. So I am going to take everything that I learned and I'm going to put it in put it in a little box and name the box. So this box is named materials for let's say stationery. And then I will remember materials for stationery. And when I open the box, I will remember to access the box, and I will remember what's in the box. If I know how to, if I summarize it and in a way label it, it will help me remember, right? So it's important that you give them time to do that. But remember that take a moment to do this summarizing in class, in a writing activity or maybe in a speaking activity. Because it will give you also the opportunity to see if they still have doubts, to see maybe if they got it, if they didn't get it. And you can also, once they got it, once it's clear for them what it is, you can reassure them of their progress, right? And the third suggestion, brace yourselves, is homework. Now, I know not everybody is a big fan of homework, but homework can be used for students to practice, review, and apply what they learn. If you want to stretch it a bit more, you can maybe use projects for more able students, because not only projects will help them work on, it will help them work on collaboration, on communication. Projects instigate critical thinking as well. So this is for everyone in general, but in case of homework, it could be for the more able students. But for the ones that are maybe still struggling a little bit, you can maybe use the homework from, let's say, an activity book or a workbook, or maybe you can adapt a worksheet for them. But still, homework is another way to consolidate learning. Okay? Now, let's take a look at some ideas for differentiation. So, in terms of input, you can adapt the content you are going to teach. You can choose the most appropriate resources, the most appropriate language, and even use and have students use Portuguese. Okay, I know this is a tricky area, but it's okay for them to use Portuguese whenever you believe it's necessary. But in order to make that decision, you have to keep your goals in mind. So what is it that I want my students to understand? What is it that I want them to produce, right? So what is my goal, and what are the learning outcomes of that lesson? So in order to make that decision about whether using or not using Portuguese and how much of Portuguese should be used, you have to have that in mind, okay? Now, in terms of output, maybe you can increase or reduce the amount of work students have to produce, and then, or also you can make changes in the activities depending on how demanding they are cognitively. Okay. Now, in terms of expected outcomes, you can set short-term goals that are achievable. This is important. They have to be achievable, and then evaluate how effective the support you provide is. Now, by achievable, it has to do not only with what your students, it's not what your students know. So when you think about achievable, you have to think about you cannot expect them to produce anything that has not been presented, that has not been taught. So have that in mind. It seems obvious, but it's not actually, it's right. So you have to think about because expectations are a tricky bit, because we know that there is the rational component of I know what I've done and I know what I can have my students do, but there is also the emotional component of I wanted them to do more, or I know this guy cannot do as much. So you have to sort of calibrate that and think about achievable goals in terms of what they can produce. Okay. And as for learner autonomy, you can encourage maybe more able students to monitor their own learning and help them. You can provide them tools for them to extend their learning inside and outside class. So that's for more able students. And you also may want to use technology for all your students to develop autonomy. Now, this last comment is from the bibliography. Okay, it's from the book I used to prepare this presentation. But on a side note here, talking about technology, there will not be a better moment to talk about the use of technology than right now, because we are at home, our students are at home. So, and I know that there are situations it's not possible to use technology all the time, and there are other issues with maybe not all students have access to technology, but maybe you don't have access to the technology you wish you had in order to teach. But we gotta work with what we have. But still, the use of technology at this moment is essential to help students learn. So I am not saying use it 24/7. I am not saying use it, use everything you can. Again, have your goals in mind, have your students' resources in mind, and plan the lesson accordingly, right? But one thing that we cannot discuss is that the use of technology is not a fad. It's not for teachers who have the resources and with students that have the resources. Not using technology is not an option anymore. I wanted to make that clear, because even not just because of the availability of technology, not just because they are learning how to use smartphones as babies, they are already learning to use smartphones from their parents, but they are also learning to use technology at school. So using technology is part of the curriculum. So we cannot simply ignore the existence of technology. We have to use it, right? But again, like I said, have your goals in mind, have clear expectations, right? Have realistic expectations of what you can use and the results of that. Okay? Now, for the lesson that I showed today, the one about materials. So let's take a look at a suggestions for consolidation. This is a simple one, right? You may want your students to expand on what they saw in class and find other objects at home. So it's an extension of the second page, of the activity on the second page. So they did it in class, they did it in school, and now they're going to do it at home. And then the idea is for them to find different objects, other things, right? So they can find out that they use plastic to make plastic bottle. They use the plastic bottles that they see in school, plastic cups, but there's plastic on the arms of the chairs. So they can see the use of plastic, the use of different materials in different objects that they find at home. So this is one way to consolidate learning. And as for differentiation, when we think about more able students or more struggling students, you may want to use, again, the suggestion for the glossary that comes with the material. But if you have maybe more struggling students, you may want to create your own form of Pictionary. So you create this handout with the pictures of the materials, and then have students write down the words, and then that could be for, they can do that in English and in Portuguese if it helps them, all right? Now, so that's it for CLIL, right? And I know it's a lot already, but again, it's the beginning of a conversation. But now I wanted to show you something that is specific for the science lesson, okay? Some of you may be familiar with Jane Turner. Jane Turner is a professor at the University of Hertfordshire. That was a hard one to say. And she is a curriculum expert specialized in primary science. Now, she is an expert in the area, and she has researched extensively on the topic. And she has some ideas of what teaching primary science should look like, or what a good science lesson should be like. So, first of all, the lesson should be taught as a science lesson, right? It should focus on the science phenomenon, right? It should begin with the science phenomenon. So, because students should be able to connect it with their other experience, with their other subjects, because the reality is that we don't teach in isolation. So we should create a context that makes sense to the students, right? But always remember that science should be at the core of it. Next one is that the lesson should have a clear purpose. Now, we already do that with our English lessons, and so in order not to have any misconceptions or misunderstanding in the science lesson, make sure that your purpose is clear. So because it's about knowing what you're doing, it's about knowing what you want to do and knowing when you get there. So it has to be clear for you, so it becomes clear for them. Right? They are already facing things that are new to them. We don't need to confuse them with unclear instructions or unclear purposes. Okay? Whenever possible, you should take your students outdoors, right? As much as you can. Not just for nature itself, but for children to explore the space outside. Got to think that practical work, really hands-on work, is really important, not only for the kinesthetic effect of it, but to raise their interest, to engage them, right? You want to engage their hands and you want to engage their minds. That's the idea of taking them outside, right? The lesson should be challenging. They should not be finding out something that they already know, right? There is no, what is the purpose of that? What is the, why would I do that? Why would I look for something that I already know, right? So they should be looking for something more. They should be trying to answer different questions, right? They have to feel that they're discovering something that they didn't know before. So again, it's about raising interest and not making it boring. Okay, so students should be able to take a moment to summarize what they have learned. So summary, this is a familiar term, right? We talked about it in reviewing when we talked about consolidating learning. So it is a moment for them to really to create that box and label the box. So this will help them solidify the learning. They will actually consolidate learning. And for the teachers, it's an opportunity to confirm that, or maybe to find misconceptions that they have and clarify that. Okay, so that's not exactly what I said. That's not exactly what the concept is. So let's go back and let's take a look again, right? And clarify that, right? And last, it should offer opportunities for sharing. So like providing feedback, like working in groups. So students should feel comfortable and confident enough to share what they have learned with their classmates and with you. So, and also they should be able to receive feedback from their peers and from you, right? Positive feedback, from positive and informed feedback from their peers and from you to keep going, right? So now it would be a good moment for us to put the ideas into practice. Now, let me show you something. So this is the lesson following that one, right? So, and my idea here was actually for you to plan it, plan one part of it, plan parts of it, or maybe plan all of it, taking into consideration everything that I said today. But unfortunately, I'm checking the time here, and we won't have time to do that, right? We won't have time to do the whole thing. But I'm going to invite you to do it later, right? Think about thinking about all the aspects that we talked about today, and to help you with that. Let me go back here. These are the things that we talked about and the things that I want you to consider when planning that lesson. So think about the information about CLIL. So what is CLIL, how you integrate that, the different models, the 4 C's, the languages of CLIL, the different languages of CLIL, right? Think about scaffolding, about how we can provide scaffolding, why we provide scaffolding, for which aspects of the learning process we provide scaffolding. In terms of classroom language, why we use classroom language, different ways to instigate language production, written and spoken language production. So what are the strategies that we can use? In terms of developing learning strategies, what are the strategies available? How we can show them how the strategies work, and think of creating combinations for a more effective learning process. And each student should have their own. In terms of consolidation, what do you do to consolidate learning? What do you do in terms of differentiation? What do you do when you have students of different levels of knowledge, not only in terms of content, but in language? And what do you do to deal with those different realities in the classroom? And this idea for best practice in the science class. So I'd like you to consider all those things. I know it's a lot, but in order to help you out, I've created the handout for this presentation, which you can download using the QR code on screen or the link below, right? I'm giving you some time to take a picture if you want, but it's okay if you don't do it now. It's okay that if you don't get it. Don't worry about it, right? So at the end of the presentation, I am going to give you my email and I will send you the links later, okay? So don't worry about that. Now, we are really at the last part of the presentation, at the last part of the session, but I'd like to mention just a few more comments about planning and delivering a lesson. And some of them may be used for face-to-face instruction, and some of them may be used for face-to-face instruction and online lessons as well. I believe they're used for both contexts, both learning environments, but please feel free to make your own, have your own thoughts about it and see what works best for you, okay? So the first thing that I wanted to say is make science work a habit, okay? A habit for you, a habit for them. The more students come in contact with science content and see it as it is, science for science, the more comfortable they will get studying it. And the same thing works for you, actually, because like anything in life, the more you do it, the more used to it you will get. So it's like learning, for me, for example, is learning how to cook. I didn't know how to cook to save my life, right? And with the current situation, I saw myself needing to learn a few things, and I actually did it. So now, like say a month and a half later, I can say that there are things that I do now in the kitchen that I didn't used to do before, I'm quite comfortable doing those things, and I'm still learning other things that I will feel comfortable maybe later. But again, it's a work of habit. It's a work of making it a habit. And the more comfortable you feel with that, the more you're comfortable you feel teaching, the more confident you will feel teaching. So there is an issue with comfort that is directly related to confidence. And the other thing about making it a habit, making it something that they are already, for the students specifically, so making it something that they are already used to doing and to seeing and working on a regular basis. This is also good because it can stimulate collaboration and production between students. So that's with the group. So the more comfortable they are, they will feel more. They will feel the freedom to experiment more, to try different things, to do more, right? And that is for then among students and between students and you too. So you will have this. It will create this atmosphere of more comfort and more confidence for the whole group, for all of you. Next up is pair up students of different levels of language proficiency. So the idea here is to group students of different levels of language knowledge. We already do this in the language class, right? And we know why we do that. So the idea here is for the strong students to work as a model for the more struggling ones. And the benefit of that in the science lesson is that you are doing it not only just for the language input that we already have in an English lesson, but also they will also work as a model in regards to the science content as well. So it will and they will help and the more struggling students. No, excuse me, I'm sorry. The stronger students will end up helping the more struggling ones. And that's a huge point for collaboration. Now, in both face-to-face lessons and video lessons, live lessons or recordings, synchronous or asynchronous, it is important to make sure that your aims, your goals, and your instructions are clear in every way possible. So think about the language you use, the tone of voice. It seems silly, but it's not. You got to think about the tone of voice, the level of noise around you. So if you are thinking about a recorded lesson, if it helps you, write notes, maybe write a script, rehearse. If you think it will give you more confidence, it's okay, and it works. Do what it takes so you feel confident about what you are going to say. Another important thing, and again, it seems unimportant, but it's not, is to make sure that there are no distractions. So the idea is, I want my students to focus on what I'm going to teach them. So even little things like the background should contain only what is important for the lesson. Now, I know that you've probably seen Zoom presentations or Zoom meetings where people can actually personalize or customize the background. So you have like Star Wars backgrounds, or they are in a forest, or they are at a circus, or at a club, at the beach. It's all really nice and very, very entertaining, but the idea for the lesson is not to entertain, it's to teach. So it's not that you are going to be extremely serious all the time. It's not that you are not going to have, moments of humor. But when thinking about teaching, you have to make sure that you keep it simple and straight to the point. So try not to have a lot of distractions in the background. Try to have only what is necessary for that lesson. For example, in a science experiment, specifically for the science lesson, if you are going to demonstrate a science experiment, you're going to run a science experiment on camera, make sure that you have everything that you need before you actually start filming, right? And also make sure that you show everything to the students on camera, so they really see what you are about to do. And as for language development, finally, check that they understand the instructions. Okay, check that. So what are you going to do? This is what you did, and then what are you going to do next, etc., right? And demonstrate if necessary. Again, this is what we have talked about: providing support, about scaffolding, about monitoring, etc., right? Next up is encourage students to use the language that they have, okay? Even if it's linguistically inaccurate, even if they make mistakes, right? Every day, native language. Portuguese is necessary. Again, this is what I mentioned before, right? You have to remember your goals, and you have to remember what you need to do to help your students achieve them. So it's okay to use Portuguese, but be careful when you make that decision. Okay. Next up is students might misfocus sometimes, especially when you give them an activity like, okay, so now you are going to walk around the classroom or walk around the school to find plastic bottles or concrete benches, etc. So it's going to be a mess. They're going to walk around, they're going to run around, they're going to talk to each other. They're not going to pay attention to you. When it's time to use the magnifying glass, no, it's my turn. No, but I did it before. No, you're cheating. Da. So it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a riot. So it is important that you also keep an eye on that. So refocus them when necessary. And also, as you do that, guide the production, guides the activity, guides the discussions, keep students on the right track, okay? But again, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be too strict. You can use that to encourage a natural flow to the conversation. So remember what Jane Turner said, that can be useful when you find out any misconceptions students might have. And so it is your opportunity to correct them, okay? Next, inaccurate ideas should not be dismissed, but discussed. Well, this is very much related to critical thinking, because the best way to confirm information is to do research, which is exactly the scientific approach. So the best thing to do, the best course of action at this point, is to have them research. They have to bring information to sustain their arguments. They have to bring them to class. They have to present them. Because not only this will enrich the discussion, it will bring more, it will complement the discussion, but it will make the science lesson more interesting for them and for you. When they feel that they discovered something that they didn't know, it's like what Jane Turner said again, it's the discovering something that was unknown to them. That is exciting. That is interesting. All right? Now, whenever possible, okay, now I know this is a tricky one, but whenever possible, encourage parent participation. Okay? At this moment, we gotta be careful with what we are doing here, but whenever possible, whenever you can, if there is maybe a little experiment that students can do at home, something small and safe and actually doable, right, by the students with the supervision of the parents, it's a good idea to do that. Remember, when sometimes we see things on television, people are trying crazy experiments and they make a joke and they say, kids, don't try this at home. It's okay to try this at home under the supervision of a parent or somebody responsible. So the idea is to actually encourage that and to bring parents to the science lesson, because not only it will create a bigger bond between you and the parents. So the parents will be your partners in crime with the science experiments, but in the science experiment. But it's for the parents also to see what their children are learning, and to create a bigger bond between the student and the parent when learning together. So it is the parent becomes, it's not that the parent becomes a student, but the parent becomes also becomes another resource for you to keep the lesson going, right? And the last one, and this is for everyday situations. This is not just for the language class. This is not just for the CLIL class, but I believe this is for every situation in life, right? It is important that you as a teacher model and foster respect and collaboration. It's okay to let students express themselves, but it's not okay if they disrespect a colleague, a classmate, or you, right? Again, it is okay to, let's agree to disagree, right? If there is an issue to be discussed, I mean, content-wise or language-wise, as I mentioned before, and because we are in this context of a science lesson, have them do the research to sustain their arguments, right? But again, all in a spirit of collaboration and respect. Because the idea is to really have them think about their production, is really to have them think about what is happening in the science lesson, and not the lack of information is not the answer there. So they need to find the answers to the things that they are looking for. This will not only make the lesson rich, but it will also, it's another opportunity for you to foster collaboration. They can work together in projects. They can find the answers together. So that is very important, and it's a super bonus as well. Okay, so like I said before, this is the beginning of a conversation about CLIL. This is not everything, but I hope it helped you understand what it is and how it can work. The one thing that I would like to mention is that CLIL, again, like we've seen now, is not a traditional English language course. But if we think about the aspects that we just saw, it's not that different either. I don't know if you agree with me or not. But it's not, in terms of planning a lesson, in terms of delivering a lesson, it's not about starting from scratch. It's not about, I don't know anything about this. No, it's quite the opposite. It's about using the experience that you already have as a language teacher, and then incorporate other elements, other resources, content, and techniques, so you can accommodate this new content, and then over time really integrate language with the new content. In this case, we're talking about science, but as in a language lesson, you are already used to planning, and teaching. If something goes wrong, if something does not go the way you expected, it's okay to go back to the drawing board. It's okay, you reflect on what happened, you use that to replan your lesson, because this is for everyone, not students or teachers, but for everyone. Making mistakes is a big part of learning. So they are learning science, we are learning to teach science. It is important that we remember that. So don't be so hard on yourself. It's a part of learning too. Unfortunately, we are not going to have time for questions. I'm already 7 minutes late. So I'd like to apologize for that. But I'm going to give you my email. Please feel free to write with your comments, with your suggestions, maybe your questions if you still have any. I would love to help you with that. And I'd like to also share the Disal email. So if you need to request your certificate of attendance for this presentation. And for the ones who stayed to the end, once again, thank you very, very, very much for watching. And maybe I'll see you again. Maybe I'll see you in person next time. Who knows? All right. So again, thank you very much. Bye-bye.